The following is an excerpt from the first chapter of The Color of Magic by Terry Pratchett. This is purely for demonstration purposes, showing my craft as an audiobook narrator. There is no profit being made from this. It is purely for demonstrational purposes. The Color of Magic by Terry Pratchett. Fire roared through the bifurcated city of Ankh-Morpork. Where it licked the wizard's quarter, it burned blue and green, and was even laced with strange sparks of the eighth color, octarine. Where its outriders found their way into the vats and oil stores all along Merchant Street, it progressed in a series of blazing fountains and explosions. In the streets of the perfume blenders it burned with a sweetness. Where it touched bundles of rare and dry herbs, in the storerooms of the jug masters, it made men go mad and talk to God. By now the whole of downtown Morport was alight, and the richer and worthier citizens of Ankh on the far bank were bravely responding to the situation by feverishly demolishing the bridges. But already the ships in the Morport docks, laden with grain, cotton, and timber, and coated with tar, were blazing merrily, and, their moorings burnt to ashes, were breasting the river Ankh on the ebb tide, igniting riverside palaces and bowers as they drifted like drowning fireflies towards the sea. In any case, sparks were riding the breeze and touching down far across the river, in hidden gardens and remote rickyards. The smoke from the merry burning rose miles high, in a wind-sculpted black column that could be seen across the whole of the Discworld. It was certainly oppressive from the cool, dark hilltop a few leagues away, where two figures were watching with considerable interest. The taller of the pair was chewing on a chicken leg and leaning on a sword that was only marginally shorter than the average man. If it wasn't for the air of wary intelligence about him, it might have been supposed that he was a barbarian from the Humbland wastes. His partner was much shorter, and wrapped from head to toe in a brown cloak. Later, when he has occasion to move, it will be seen that he moves lightly, cat-like. The two had barely exchanged a word in the last 20 minutes, except for a short and inconclusive argument as to whether a particularly powerful explosion had been the oil bond store or the workshop of Caribou the Enchanter. Money hinged on the fact. Now the big man finished gnawing at the bone and tossed it into the grass, smiling ruefully.
"Don't go all those little alleyways," he said. "I likes them."
"Oh, the treasure houses,"
said the small man. He added thoughtfully,
"Do gems burn? I wonder. 'Tis said they're kin to coal."
"All the gold melting and running down the gutters,"
said the big one, ignoring him.
"and all the wine boiling in the barrows."
"There were rats,"
said the brown companion.
"Rats, I'll grant you."
"It was no place to be in high summer."
"That too. One can't help feeling, though, a momentary—"
He trailed off, then brightened.
"Wee-ho, don't feather up the crimson leech 8 silver pieces,"
he added. The little man nodded. They were silent for a while as a whole new series of explosions carved a red line across a hitherto dark section of the greatest city in the world. Then the big man stirred.
"Weasel?"
"Yes?"
"I wonder who started it."
The small swordsman known as the Weasel said nothing. He was watching the road in the ruddy light. Few had come that way since the Discworld gate had been one of the first to collapse in a shower of white-hot embers. But two were coming up it now. The weasel's eyes, always at their sharpest in gloom and half-light, made out the shapes of two mounted men, and some sort of low beast behind them. Doubtless a rich merchant escaping with as much treasure as he could lay frantic hands on. The weasel said as much to his companion, who sighed.
"The status of footpad here suits us," said the barbarian. "But, as you say, times are hard and there are no soft beds tonight."
He shifted his grip on his sword and, as the leading rider drew near, stepped out into the road with a hand held up and his face set in a grin nicely calculated to reassure, yet threaten.
"Your pardon, sir," he began.
The rider reined in his horse and drew back his hood. The big man looked into a face blotched with superficial burns and punctuated by tufts of a singed beard. Even the eyebrows had gone.
"Bugger off," said the face. "You're Brav the Hublander, aren't you?"
Brav became aware that he had fumbled the initiative.
"Just go away, will you?" said the rider. "I just haven't got time for you, do you understand?"
He looked around and added,
"That goes for your shadow-loving flea-bag partner too, wherever he's hiding."
The weasel stepped up to the horse and peered at the disheveled figure.
"Why, it's Rincewind the Wizard, isn't it?"
he said in tones of delight, meanwhile filing the wizard's description of him in his memory for leisurely vengeance.
"I thought I recognized the voice."
Brav spat and sheathed his sword. It was seldom worth tangling with wizards. They so rarely had any treasure worth speaking of.
"He talks pretty big for a gutter wizard," he muttered.
"You don't understand at all," said the wizard wearily. "I'm so scared of you my spine has turned to jelly. It's just that I'm suffering from an overdose of terror right now. I mean, when I've got over that, then I'll have time to be decently frightened of you." The weasel pointed towards the burning city.
"You've been through that?"
he asked. The wizard rubbed a red raw hand across his eyes. "I was there when it started. See him? Back there?" He pointed back down the road to where his traveling companion was still approaching, having adopted a method of riding that involved falling out of the saddle every few seconds.
"Well?"
said Weasel. "He started it," Rincewind said simply. Brav and Weasel looked at the figure, now hopping across the road with one foot in a stirrup.
"Fire Razor, is he?"
said Brav at last. "No," said Rincewind, "not precisely. Let's just say that if complete and utter chaos were lightning, then he'd be the sort to stand on a hilltop in a thunderstorm, wearing wet copper armor and shouting, 'All gods are bastards!' Got any food?"
"There's some chicken,"
said Weasel,
"in exchange for a story."
"What's his name?"
said Brav, who tended to lag behind in conversations. "Two Flower."
"Two Flower," said Brav. "What a funny name."
"You," said Rincewind, dismounting, "do not know the half of it. Chicken, you say?"
"Deviled,"
said Weasel. The wizard groaned.
"That reminds me,"
added the weasel, snapping his fingers.
"there was a really big explosion about, half an hour ago."
"That was the oil bond store going up," said Rincewind, wincing at the memory of the burning rain. Weasel turned and grinned expectantly at his companion, who grunted and handed over a coin from his pouch. Then there was a scream from the roadway, cut off abruptly. Rincewind did not look up from his chicken. One of the things that he can't do, he can't ride a horse, he said. Then he stiffened up as if sandbagged by a sudden recollection, gave a small yelp of terror, and dashed into the gloom. When he returned, the being called Two-Flower was hanging limply over his shoulder. It was small and skinny, and dressed very oddly in a pair of knee-length breeches and a shirt in such a violent and vivid conflict of colors that Weasel's fastidious eye was offended even in the half-light. "No bones broken by the feel of things," said Rincewind. He was breathing heavily. Brab winked at the weasel and went to investigate the shape that they assumed was a pack animal. "You would be wise to forget it," said the wizard, without looking up from his examination of the unconscious Two-Flower. "Believe me, a power protects it." "A spell?" said Weasel, squatting down. "No, but a magic of a kind, I think. Not the usual sort. I mean, it can turn gold into copper while at the same time it is still gold. It makes men rich by destroying their possessions. It allows the weak to walk fearlessly among thieves. It passes through the strongest doors to reach the most protected treasures. Even now it has me enslaved, so that I must follow this madman willy-nilly and protect him from harm. It's stronger than you, Brab. It is, I think, more cunning even than you, Weasel." "What is it called, then, this mighty magic?" Rincewind shrugged. "In our tongue it is called reflected sound as of underground spirits. Is there any wine?" "You must know that I am not without artifice where magic is concerned," said Weasel. "Only last year did I, assisted by my friend here, part the notoriously powerful Archmage of Yumitari from his staff, his belt of moon jewels, and his life, in that approximate order. I do not fear this reflective sound of underground spirits of which you speak. However," he added, "you engage my interest. Perhaps you would care to tell me more?" Brab looked at the shape on the road. It was closer now, and clearer in the pre-dawn light. It looked for all the world like "A box on legs," he said. "I'll tell you about it," said Rincewind. "If there's any wine, that is." Down in the valley there was a roar and a hiss. Someone more thoughtful than the rest had ordered to be shut the big river gates that were at the point where the Ankh flowed out of the Twin City. Denied its usual egress, the river had burst its banks and was pouring down the fire-ravaged streets. Soon the continent of flame became a series of islands, each one growing smaller as the dark tide rose. And up from the city of fumes and smoke rose a boiling cloud of steam, covering the stars. Weasel thought that it looked like some dark fungus or mushroom. The twin city of proud Ankh and pestilent Morpork, of which all the other cities of time and space are, as it were, mere reflections, had stood many assaults in its long and crowded history, and has always risen to flourish again. So the fire and its subsequent flood, which destroyed everything left that was not flammable, and added a particularly noisome flux to the other survivors' problems, did not mark its end. Rather, it was a fiery punctuation mark, coal-like comma, or salamander's semicolon in a continuing story. Several days before these events, a ship came up the Ankh on the dawn tide and fetched up, among many others, in the maze of wharves and docks on the Morpork shore. It carried a cargo of pink pearls, milk nuts, pumice, some official letters for the partition of Ankh, and a man. It was the man who engaged the attention of Blind Hugh, one of the beggars on early duty at Pearl Dock. He nudged Cripple Wah in the ribs and pointed wordlessly. Now the stranger was standing on the quayside, watching several straining seamen carry a large, brass-bound chest down the gangplank. Another man, obviously the captain, was standing beside him. There was about the seaman, every nerve in Blinding's body, which tended to vibrate in the presence of even a small amount of impure gold at 50 paces, screamed into his brain, the air of one anticipating imminent enrichment. Sure enough, when the chest had been deposited on the cobbles, the stranger reached into a pouch, and there was the flash of a coin. Several coins. Gold. Blind Hugh, his body twanging like a hazel rod in the presence of water, whistled to himself. Then he nudged Wah again, and sent him scurrying off down a nearby alley into the heart of the city. When the captain walked back onto his ship, leaving the newcomer looking faintly bewildered on the quayside, Blind Hugh snatched up his bacon cup and made his way across the street with an ingratiating leer. At the sight of him, the stranger started to fumble urgently with his money pouch.
"Good day to thee, sire,"
Blind Hugh began, and found himself looking up into the face with 4 eyes in it. He turned to run. "Huh?" said the stranger, and grabbed his arm. Hugh was aware that the sailors lining the rail of the ship were laughing at him. At the same time, his specialized senses detected an overpowering impression of money. He froze. The stranger let go, and quickly thumbed through a small black book he had taken from his belt. Then he said, "Hallo?"
"What?"
said Hugh. The man looked blank. "Hallo?" he repeated, rather louder than necessary, and so carefully that Hugh could hear the vowels tinkling into place.
"Hello yourself,"
Hugh reposited. The stranger smiled widely, fumbled yet again in the pouch. This time his hand came out, holding a large gold coin. It was, in fact, slightly larger than an $8,000 Antkian crown, and the design of it was unfamiliar. But it spoke inside Hugh's mind in a language he understood perfectly. "My current owner," it said, "is in need of succor and assistance. Why not give it to him so you and me can go off somewhere and enjoy ourselves?" Subtle changes in the beggar's posture made the stranger feel more at ease. He consulted the small book again. "I wish to be directed to a hotel, tavern, lodging house, inn, hospice, caravanserai," he said.
"What, all of them?"
said Hugh, taken aback. "Huh?" said the stranger. Hugh was aware that a small crowd of fishwives, shellfish diggers, and freelance scarpers was watching them with interest.
"Look," he said, "I know a good tavern. Is that enough?"
He shuddered to think of the gold coin escaping from his life. He'd keep that one even if Ymor confiscated all the rest. And the big chest that comprised most of the newcomer's luggage looked to be full of gold, Hugh decided. The 4-eyed man looked at his book. "I would like to be directed to a hotel, a place of repose, tavern,
"Yes, all right, come on then,"
said Hugh hurriedly. He picked up one of the bundles and walked away quickly. The stranger, after a moment's hesitation, strolled after him. A train of thought shunted its way through Hugh's mind. Getting the newcomer to the broken drum so easily was a stroke of luck, no doubt of it, and Ymor would probably reward him. But, for all of his new acquaintance's mildness, there was something about him that made Hugh uneasy, and for the life of him he couldn't figure out what it was. Not the 2 extra eyes, odd though they were. There was something else. He glanced back. The little man was ambling along in the middle of the street, looking around him with an expression of keen interest. Something else Hugh saw nearly made him gibber. The massive wooden chest, which he had last seen resting solidly on the quayside, was following on its master's heels with a gentle rocking gait. Slowly, in case a sudden movement on his part might break his fragile control over his own legs, Hugh bent slightly so that he could see under the chest. There were lots and lots of little legs. Very deliberately, Hugh turned around and walked very carefully toward the broken drum.